Shalom, shalom. I wanted to share with you, it's about 48 hours before Rosh Hashana, I wanted to share specifically with the parents of the Talmidim of Yeshivat Mevaseret going into 5773, a special message at Dvar Torah. Again, it's certainly relevant and appropriate for anyone, but specifically to the parents, I want to share the following idea. The Gemara tells us in Maseches Rosh Hashana, the Mishnah says that Kol Boi Olam Ovrin Lefanav Kivnei Maron, that all of the world, all of mankind presents itself in front of Hashem, Kivnei Maron. What exactly does that mean? A vague term, Kivnei Maron. The Gemara is not 100% clear, and the Gemara offers three alternative interpretations. What does it mean, specifically, Kivnei Maron? The first interpretation is Kivnei Imrana. What does Kivnei Imrana mean? Like a sheep. Like sheep pass in front of a shepherd. He wants to count his flock, so we pass in front of Hashem just like sheep pass in front of the shepherd as he counts his flock one by one. That's interpretation number one, and this reference is certainly referred to in the Unasana Kotoket that we say on Rosh Hashana and Yom Kippur every single year. Second interpretation is Kema'alot Beit Maron. There was a place called Beit Maron which was very steep and had a very, very narrow pass. And says Rashi, explains Rashi, that what does this mean? We pass in front of Hashem as if you're on a hike, you're on a tiyul, and you hit that narrow pass, that narrow bridge, that narrow steep place. You can't go ahead and go as a group, you have to go one by one. That's the second interpretation. People traveling one by one across this narrow pass. The third interpretation is Kechayalot Shel Beit David, like the army, the soldiers of Beit David, which every so often the soldiers have to go ahead and present themselves to the king for inspection, and rank and file, one by one, they pass in front of the king for the inspection. What is the common denominator that is found when it comes to all of these interpretations? So all of these interpretations have the denominator of, you have a group, you have a class, you have the sheep, you have the hikers, you have the soldiers, they're part of a group. But there's certain points that they present themselves as individuals. The sheep is counted one by one. When you pass that narrow, hazardous pass, you have to go single file. You cannot go as a group, you have to go one by one. And the soldiers, yes, operate as a team, but sometimes they have to present themselves as individuals one by one. And this is really what Rosh Hashana represents. We find ourselves, on the one hand, we're Klal Yisrael, we're part of a larger group, we're part of a tzibur, a kahal. But when it comes to Rosh Hashana, the judgment and the din is a very lonely judgment. It's a judgment where we have to go ahead and separate ourselves from the group, and we present ourselves to Hashem as an individual. And perhaps that's where the Yira comes from. It's a very, very awesome day. It's a day that certainly is a day of Yira, because to go ahead and extricate yourself from the group and present yourself as an individual, even though you're part of a group, is a very, very scary thing. On the other hand, when it comes to Rosh Hashana, this is very clear. Rosh Hashana is a very dichotomous day. It has multiple features. We'll cry to Hashem for half the day, but then we'll have a festive meal. We'll go ahead and, on the one hand, we won't say Hallel, but the Rambam tells us the reason we don't say Hallel in Rosh Hashana, Sifrei Chaim, Sifrei Mesim, Psuchim Lefanecha, the books of life and death are open in front of Hashem, and therefore, says the Rambam, it is not a day of Simcha Yesera. It's not a day of excessive Simcha. Albeit, Simcha yes, but not excessive Simcha. So there's two poles to the day. On the one hand, it's a day of fear, of awe, Yamim Noraim. On the other hand, we do sit down to a festive meal, and we do have a sense of Simcha. We'll sing Zmiros, even in the davening. There are parts of davening which were very, very dire. We sing dirges, and then there are other parts of davening which are very upbeat. Where exactly does this dichotomy come from? So if you take a look at this week's parasha, perhaps the idea is found here as well. Because we're told that after the tremendous sense of klalos that we heard from Hashem in last week's parasha, 98 separate klalos, when all is said and done, we're told, Atem Nitzavim Hayom Kulchem. And Rashi cites the fact that even with all the klalos, despite everything, we are part of Knesset Yisrael. We have a unique relationship with Hashem. We're part of a larger group. And although there are klalos, understand you're part of a collective. And as such, lo itchem levadchem, not just with you as an individual, anochi kores es habris, but with a larger group, with all of Klal Yisrael. And this is why, for example, no coincidence, we learn the halachos of Kol Yisrael Arevim Zelazeh, that we're all responsible for each other in this week's parasha. The Tur comments that unlike, for example, imagine if you're on the death penalty, Chas v'Shalom, you're on the death row, and you have a judgment, the final appeal, Yom Hadin. So you'd be very fearful. You wouldn't necessarily dress up in a suit and shave and shower and be upbeat about what's ahead of you. But the Tur writes in the beginning of Hilchos Rosh Hashana that that's how we are in Rosh Hashana, a sense of confidence, a sense of